The Appalachian Mountains stretch for more than 1,000 miles. A spine of ancient rock and shadow that cuts through the eastern United States. People who grew up near those woods will tell you the same thing. There are places you don't go after dark, and some you don't go at all. Between 1977 and 1979, a narrow section of highway called Route 117 earned that kind of reputation. It ran between rural Virginia and the edge of North Carolina, through 30 miles of thick, unbroken forest. The road had no gas stations, no towns, just a single ranger station halfway through. Truckers said the trees there felt different closer together, as if the forest itself was leaning inward. And at night, the air never stayed still. You could roll your window down and hear something that wasn't quite wind, a low hum, like electricity under the ground. The first reports came in early 1978. A passing driver spotted a car parked on the shoulder, engine running, headlights on, driver's door wide open. Inside, the radio played static. The police assumed the driver had wandered off, maybe disoriented. But then it happened again and again. By the end of that summer, 5 vehicles had been found the same way, abandoned, perfectly aligned to the road, like their owners had all stepped out at the same time and simply walked into the trees. Search dogs followed the scent trails for a few hundred feet, until the tracks just stopped. No struggle, no blood, just stopped. Locals began avoiding the route entirely. They said you could hear whispers near the tree line, especially just before dawn, fragments of voices calling out names you didn't know. Hunters claimed to see light shapes moving deep in the forest, flickering between the trunks like reflections without a source. A retired ranger, Samuel Kerr, once told a newspaper reporter,
"You'd hear something far off footsteps, maybe, but not in any direction you could follow. Every time you turned your head, it came from somewhere else."
And then there were the sounds. A strange pattern began to appear in the reports, a low metallic ring like distant church bells echoing through the valley in the middle of the night. But no one could find the source. No towers, no buildings, not even a chapel within miles. The forest around Route 117 had become something else, a place where sound and distance no longer made sense. And for the people who drove through it, it felt less like a road and more like a warning. By the fall of 1978, Route 117 was barely used. Locals said the forest had started to swallow it, moss growing over the guardrails, vines curling through cracks in the asphalt. But for people who lived in those hills, the strangest part wasn't what they could see. It was what they could hear. Every few weeks, a new call came into the Appalachian Ranger Service. Voices in the woods, someone screaming for help, lights near the creek. Each time, rangers were dispatched, and each time, nothing was found. No footprints, no evidence. Just the same story, repeated by different people. Then, on October 12th, a man named Michael Hardy was reported missing. He was a local delivery driver heading through Route 117 to drop off supplies at the ranger station. They found his truck 2 days later parked on the shoulder, headlights still on, doors open. Inside, a thermos of coffee still warm. The only sound was the radio, quietly whispering static. The report says the search lasted 3 days. On the second night, one of the rangers, Paul Henson, radioed back to base, saying he'd found something in the woods about half a mile from the truck. He described it as a structure of some kind, maybe stairs. Then the transmission cut off. When they found his radio, it was still on, but the batteries were dead, completely drained. After that, no one talked about Stairs again. The official record lists Henson as lost in terrain. His body was never recovered. But his partner, the other ranger on that search, filed a personal note that wasn't meant for the report. It said, "The trees were moving without wind, and I heard him calling for me long after he was gone." That winter, 2 more disappearances followed, a hunter and a hiker, both experienced outdoorsmen, both found miles apart but under identical circumstances. Their camps intact, gear untouched, and a circle of disturbed earth nearby, as if something had been placed there, then removed. The sheriff's office eventually shut down all access to that section of the highway. Officially, it was due to landslides, but everyone in the nearby towns knew better. Because at night, even from miles away, you could still hear it, a metallic sound, faint and distant, like footsteps climbing something that wasn't there. By early 1979, the area around Route 117 had turned into a dead zone. No one wanted to patrol it anymore. The few rangers who did refused to go alone. And even the truckers who had used that road for decades began taking the longer detour through Asheville, anything to avoid the forest that listens. But the Appalachian Field Office couldn't ignore the missing people. They formed a small investigation unit, 4 men and 1 woman tasked with mapping the area and recovering whatever they could find. Their lead investigator was Ranger Daniel Price, 39, with 20 years of service and a reputation for being steady under pressure. On March 8th, the team hiked 3 miles into the restricted zone. The air was still. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Only that faint metallic ringing that people kept describing like steel under tension, vibrating through the soil. Then they saw it. At first, they thought it was part of an old house foundation. A staircase made of wood so pale, it almost looked white. Perfectly clean. No moss, no dust, no footprints leading to it or away from it. Just 12 steps rising out of the earth and ending abruptly in midair. One of the men took a photograph. The film came out overexposed. Another pulled out his radio to report it, but the signal dissolved into static. Every instrument began failing, one by one. Compasses spinning, batteries draining, watches freezing on the same second. According to the only surviving witness, Ranger Kelly Reeves, they heard a low hum coming from inside the stairs. Not beneath them, inside, like the wood itself was vibrating. Price wanted to examine the structure, thinking it might be tied to the disappearances. He placed 1 foot on the first step. Reeves said she tried to stop him, but he didn't listen. He climbed 5 steps, paused, then said quietly, "It's warm." That was the last thing anyone heard. He didn't fall. He didn't scream. He simply wasn't there anymore. 1 second he was standing on the 5th step, and the next gone. Reeves ran. By the time she reached the truck, her hands were covered in blood, though she had no cuts of her own. She drove straight to the ranger station and filed the report herself. Her statement ended with 1 sentence. The stairs didn't lead up, they led away. The site was closed off the next morning. No photographs were ever released, and the official summary of the incident, obtained years later through a Freedom of Information request, contains only 5 words under findings. Subject exposure caused spatial dislocation. After the incident in March of 1979, the Appalachian Field Office filed a formal request for military assistance. The request was denied within 24 hours. 2 days later, every document related to the Route 117 investigation was marked classified. On paper, the explanation was simple: hazardous terrain, geological instability, a landslide risk zone. But the rangers who were there knew better. They said the land hadn't moved in decades. It was the air that shifted. Within a week, a team of federal contractors arrived. No agency logos, no names, just white trucks and heavy equipment. They built a temporary perimeter fence around the forest entrance, about 2 miles north of where the stairs had been found. Locals said they worked mostly at night. Lights flickered through the trees until dawn, and then silence. When the site was reopened a month later, the road looked different. Fresh asphalt, new guardrails, no trace of where the old access trail had been. It was as if that section of Route 117 had been rewritten. The few rangers still stationed in the area were instructed never to discuss the incident again. One of them, Kelly Reeves, resigned that summer. She moved out of state and never spoke publicly, but in 1993, her son gave an interview to a small newspaper in Boone, North Carolina. He said his mother kept a sealed envelope labeled, March 8, 1979, do not open. After she died, he opened it. Inside was a single photograph, dark, grainy, almost black. When lightened, it showed what looked like a staircase in the woods. But this one wasn't made of wood. It was metal, a dull gray, half buried in leaves, and somehow reflected no light. The metadata of the photo showed something impossible. The exposure time was 0 seconds. No camera could take an image like that. Not long after that article was published, the paper's archives were deleted in a server error. The journalist who wrote it quit and moved overseas. And the envelope, it vanished during the probate of her estate. Today, if you drive down the modern Route 117, there's nothing unusual to see just miles of forest and a small green sign that reads, Federal Access Road, no entry. But truckers say that on foggy nights, their radios still pick up a faint sound when they pass that area, a rhythmic pulse, like footsteps climbing somewhere just beyond the tree line. Decades have passed since the Route 117 disappearances. The maps were redrawn, the files sealed, and the names of the missing slowly faded into paper dust. But the forest never forgot. Satellite images show nothing unusual, just endless green. The same ridges and valleys that have covered Appalachia for thousands of years. Yet hikers still report strange distortions near the old boundary line. Compass needles tremble, camera batteries die, and sometimes sound itself behaves wrong. Voices echo where there should be no echo, a single word repeating back a fraction too late, as if someone were whispering from behind the trees. In 2008, a group of graduate students from Chapel Hill claimed to have rediscovered the site. They brought measuring equipment, GPS locators, and a single video camera. The footage was never released, but one of the students posted a short clip before the file was deleted. 3 seconds of static, followed by a man's voice saying, "I can see the stairs, but they're upside down." He was never identified. Locals who live near the base of the mountains say the forest still makes noise after dark, a faint metallic tone that rises and falls like someone walking up and down steps. Hunters describe seeing flashes of white between the trees, straight vertical lines where nothing should stand. They say the forest shifts there, like it's trying to remember its own shape. One retired sheriff told a journalist in 2014, "You can pave a road, build fences, tear down trees. But that place, it doesn't move forward with time. It just waits." And sometimes, when the fog rolls low through the hollows, the sound returns soft, steady, climbing through the air. Not thunder, not wind, just footsteps. People call it superstition. But in Appalachia, there's an old saying, "The woods keep what they're given." So maybe the forest isn't haunted at all. Maybe it's just full. Because somewhere out there, beneath a canopy that never stops breathing, a staircase still waits clean, untouched, and listening. And if you ever find it, don't climb. If you ever drive through the Appalachian Mountains, roll your window down. Listen carefully. You might hear it, that faint, hollow sound between the trees. Not the wind, not the birds. Just footsteps, going somewhere no road can follow. Subscribe to the Horror States and travel with us through America's dark geography. The towns that vanished, the voices that linger, and the woods that remember everything we try to bury.